that done, I strung my bow. This was my first raid. It was why I was guarding the horses and not protecting the sergeants like the other archers. Gerald One Arrow, my father, had drilled into me that an archer had to be ready at all times. While I was waiting, I chose my best arrow. My father had taught me how to fletch, and I had made all of my arrows. I had stained one of the goose feathers in each arrow red with cochineal. I used that to identify my own arrows and to help me aim. Some of the other archers did not fletch. They bought them from a fletcher. I was happier knowing that each arrow I used would be true. I chose the first one I had made, and I nocked it. Although young, I was large for my age. Most of my comrades were squat and broad. I was tall and powerful. Perhaps that was the mix of Norman and Welsh. However, I was able to move silently any time I chose. One of the horses raised her head and pricked her ears. That might have meant nothing. Horses can be sensitive creatures. But I was curious, and I cocked an ear and listened. There was a noise. It was above me. I did not think it was our men. I sniffed the air. My father was a good huntsman. He had taught me to use my nose. I smelled sweat, and I smelled mutton fat. There were Welshmen, and they were above me. I used the rocks to step silently up the bank. Further up lay ferns and bracken. I would be able to use those for cover. My brown leather jerkin was old and dull. It would blend in. My face also was tanned and not white. I was rarely indoors. As I neared the top, I dropped to my knees. As much as I wanted to be able to send an arrow at any Welshman I spied, I needed to know their numbers and their position. I had seen the footprints in the mud by the side of the stream when we had ascended. I had been suspicious, but as no one else had said anything, I had remained silent. I now saw that had been a mistake. The Welshmen had been waiting for us. They were going to turn the ambush around. I lifted my head above the bracken and edged forward. It was not easy, holding a nocked arrow and a bow. 40 paces from me I saw the line of 20 Welshmen, crouched and ready to strike. Some had helmets, and some had shields. All held a weapon. I was relieved to see that none of them held bows. I could not see our men. I guessed they were edging towards the hall. Should I shout to warn them? Would I be punished by Hugh of Rhuddlan if I did so? My decision was made for me as I saw one of the Welshmen with a helmet, a shield and a war axe stand and raise his arm. They were going to attack. I stood and brought my bow up in one swift motion. I drew back the string. I had trained for 10 years and it was as natural an action as scratching my ear. I aimed at the leader. As my arrow flew straight and true, I heard him begin to shout. I was drawing and knocking another arrow as he fell dead. Fortune favoured me, or perhaps it was God, for the men looked not at me, but at their dead leader. I sent another arrow into the man next to him. Then they saw me. From behind them I heard a shout and the clash of metal. I drew another arrow and, as 4 of them ran at me, I sent it towards the nearest man. It hit him in the chest. This was a test. How fast could I knock and release? There were 3 of them now. My next arrow hit one in the throat. 2 remained, but they were just 10 paces from me. The next Welshman to die was so close to me that I could smell his breath. My arrow went through his screaming mouth and out of the back of his head. It was his body that saved me, for the last of the men could not get at me directly. I flung aside the bow and pushed the dying man at the Welshman with the sword and shield. As he fell, I took my dagger from my left boot and grabbed the sword which had fallen from the last man I had slain. I knew how to use a warbow. A sword was a different matter. The Welshman grinned. "Boy, I am going to hamstring you first, and then have my fun with you. You have killed my brother, and you will pay. Your man's sacks will adorn my wall." There was a temptation to shout something back at him, but I was terrified. He was my size. He had a leather helmet and a long sword.